that question is answered by the year. This year, yes, next year, no, that sort of thing. At the moment, we're not welcome, but they make overtures all the time. That's something that has to be worked out. But it's also going to have to be worked out from our bosses at the highest level, National Security Council level.
How did a private group get in last month?
Believe it or not, you can, as a tourist, go to North Korea. There are tour groups that will take you to North Korea. That group got in, I believe, with special contact, special Korean, I think South Korean national contact. But you can go to China, and there are tour groups that will get you a visa to North Korea for 1 or 2 weeks, and they'll take you to all the sites, and they take everyone to visit North Korea. There's 130,000 people that visit North Korea per year as tourists. Most of them are Chinese, but there have been Americans who've gone.
I have a suggestion. I'm very sorry that the word dysfunctional has been used by military people involved with this effort. A year from now, I would hope we would have thousands of good news reports on recovery. If someone would approach the owners of the NBA and offer a goodwill effort of serious basketball camps to North Korean children in the areas that you prioritize as where you need to be first. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hear about contractors going to different places all the time, that is private contractors. I wonder if there would be any advantage in divorcing this whole project from the military and making it, even identifying it in some way as private contractors going in to do the excavation rather than a military group doing it.
We have the ability to work with to outside folks. Whether we want to contract this mission out specifically, I mean, there's a profit motive there, so it'd be a tough one to send contractors or to use contractors. But we can use contractors, we can use private consultants, we can use volunteer support as needed. But to send them into North Korea would be something that would have to be discussed at a much higher level, probably. So very senior people, and then I could see also there'd be, once you start talking about profit motive, the North Koreans like a profit and contractors like a profit. There could be some issues there.
Chris up front.
Just raise your hand, we'll get a mic. Carver, here. Rob, we got a mic here.
I've got several questions. I'm going to ask just a couple of them.
Just do one at a time.
You're going to limit me to one?
And then we'll
All right, the first one, in Dan Baughman's slide, he was showing the aircraft crash sites, the locations in North Korea. And I need to know if that was based on the coordinates that were in Paul Cole's book. And if not, if it's from the Corwall report, are they actual crash sites that were noticed on the ground, or are they just last known locations? And are particular aircraft associated or just the aircraft types?
Answer is yes to all of that. They're specific aircraft, but some of that is last known location by our Air Force, which is an F-86 pilot was flying at a few thousand feet through the clouds, and he's only estimating where somebody crashed at. So some of them are good known locations. Some provided, for example, by the Russians, a crash site where they actually went on the ground, found the pilot dead, and so on. Well, it's a mixed bag of all those you're talking about.
Okay, is there any way we can get a copy of those coordinates?
I think that's doable.
Okay.
Thank you.
When you spoke, you said that you were making specific requests from the Russians and the Chinese in terms of aircraft losses. And I wondered, when you make these requests, do you make the request for a region, a specific date, or how is it handled so that it's not just a broad, wide open request?
We started with the Chinese on POWs that were unresolved, POWs that the guys came back, the big switch came back, and they thought there was somebody who should have come back with them. There's very compelling evidence that there's a handful of guys that, what happened to this guy, should have come back and big switch. So we started with unresolved POWs, and then we worked our way into, tell us about your air defense units, give us the reports of your air defense units that shot down our planes. Also, we want all the records of the POW camps, and then over time we gave them a few other examples of POWs, see if they could find names and so on. And so it's an evolutionary process. So what we use.
And if it's in a zone or a region that overlaps through both, do you ask both always, or do you just ask?
Well, we would ask for an air defense record, and the air defense units covered a specific zone at a specific time. And if we can get the complete history of that air defense record, then we've got it covered essentially. We ask that for every Chinese regiment participating in the Korean War is on their search list in the agreement, in the arrangement that we signed within April of 2000, for example.
I just have a short question. My uncle was in the second engineers, and he was fortunate to not be killed on the retreat for the second ID between Kuniyuan and Sinchon. And you read about the gauntlet after a little bit of research, but you never, ever hear a briefing about the gauntlet. And as far as I know, there were a lot of people killed on that retreat. But what happened to these bodies? Because it was a very narrow passage and 8-mile-long roadblock, but it's like it's the biggest kept secret in the military.
And the Army estimated in the after-action report at the time there was over 400 dead that they had to leave behind there in the gauntlet. The Chinese in Operation Glory, we'll call it, did the easy ones. They recovered all the very tip of the gauntlet, the very southern end of the gauntlet, where it narrowed specifically down to a road that was blocked, is where most of the guys got killed, from what veterans are saying. And the Chinese returned a big cluster of 75 boxes that remains from that area. Now, the gauntlet is, at the moment, essentially in one part of a really, really vast compound or vast system of Chinese or North Korean political prisoner camps called the 14th Management Station. And so we think because of that, and you don't see prisoners, you see individual camps as you're driving by and so on. We know from studies done by UN and so on a lot about these. Well, in 2001, the North Koreans that we've been requesting for some years, 2001 for a month, they let JPAC teams scour the area of the gauntlet. They did recover some remains, but they were somewhat restricted by the North Koreans. And we think it's because of, it was a security sensitive area overall. That must be your next question, right? Just kidding. I'm kidding about that. So we have done work in the gauntlet, but it is on the list for further work. We're not anywhere near finished there.
This is my first year attending, and I don't know if this was ever addressed, but I'm just really curious to find out, you hear of some men that were prisoners of war in the camps and that they were able to come home. How did they escape? Were some released and some weren't? I guess I'm just trying to find out. I'm grateful for the ones that did come home, but just trying to figure out.
There were numerous prisoner halls that happened various times throughout the war. After a big battle, there's always a big prisoner hall. And for reasons we're not sure of, maybe, peace stunt. In May of 1951, the Chinese released about 100 or so prisoners that they had captured during the war back to us. That was a peace gesture. Then in as you also may know, the problem with negotiating an armistice in the Korean War was what to do with prisoners. And they finally agreed in spring of 1951 how to do the prisoner exchanges. But the Russians had suggested to do a switch of wounded prisoners. So in April 1951, there was an exchange of wounded prisoners. So we got back 153, I think, wounded prisoners at that time. And then when the armistice agreement matured, when all those negotiations matured, we finally agreed to do, every prisoner will be released who wants to come home. And all but 21 Americans decided to come home. And so they were released in August and September of 1953. There were no POW escapes that were successful by prisoners who were held way up on the Allen River. In the individual prisoner halls that were made, these guys are walking along trails and so forth, there were successful escape attempts of people dropping out of line in South Korea. It's like the Bataan Death March. You just follow a line down the hill and join the Philippine guerrillas for 4 years kind of thing. Well, they would drop out of the line and escape back to friendly lines. That did happen very early in the war during, its initial point of capture. But if somebody went to the Allen River, they didn't get back until prisoner exchanges.
Wait, I just want to amplify something. Don, we were talking before, and my brain was kind of just engaging, and I just want to amplify. To your point, we have private citizens specifically that have traveled around the world. A lot of times the World War II also, they've gone to locations that we cannot get into because it varies. It's India for one. But as a private citizen, this gentleman in particular has traveled and located sites. He's gone in there. Once he finds these sites, the problem is getting the remains out, getting JPAC's teams in there. So that's just one example. North Korea, and I recall now, this question came up, I believe, down from this question of Don and I last 2 years ago with Mr. O'Neill about using the Swedes. And in fact, Donna touched on it yesterday. In North Korea, because they've got diplomatic relations. From the State Department perspective, Mr. O'Neill said the problem is the North Koreans desperately want to engage with us. So he thought it very unlikely that they would let a third party come in and cut us out. Because they would like engaging with the United States, and that's one issue. And they use the remains issue sometimes to try to get that engagement. And then we start engaging on them, then they start doing crazy things. So it's sort of it's a very tough nut to crack.
It's a matter of technology, isn't it? Who is the contract? Who is the
I don't think. I don't know enough about it. I don't think that would be the issue, though. I think the issue is if they're a contract to the United States government, they're going to have the same problems we have going in there. The United States government's not going to send a U.S. contracting team in there. If they're contracted from another part of the world, the North Koreans would probably not let them in there to go do recovery work on behalf of the United States. So that's just, but it hasn't been brought up, and I think that's too quick to say. But we do, there are volunteers out there, and they do some great work. They find some great sites. Their frustration is they go out, they find a site, they say, now come in and come get these remains. But as the United States government, we can't just go marching in there with a blue passport and say, okay, well, now we're going to take these remains out. We have to engage that country on a much higher level, work those discussions out. And sometimes, this one person in particular is frustrated. There's other groups out there that do crazy things that drive JPAC nuts, and they go out there and they ruin sites and they get ahead of us. And that's a problem too. So it's been something that our leadership's been debating for a while. How can we engage, how can we harness all these folks out there? Can we engage private contractors? There's some that do it very well, some that aren't. And some of them are out there trying to get, especially with aircraft crash sites, there's a lot of value in those crash sites. So there's competition to get to that site. They'll get to that site, exploit the site for the aircraft. The remains are secondary, tertiary. The JPAC goes in there and the site can be compromised. So it's a tough one. I personally think the United States government, this is our mission. We do it better than anyone else. We shouldn't let anyone else do it. So, there are men, there are your loved ones. It should be us going back in there again. But it's a possibility. I just don't know that. But again, that's for higher level folks to decide. Great to back.
Okay, I have a question. You talked about all these crash sites here and where they went down and where you think the remains are left and everything like that. Korea just got the USS Pueblo and he made it into exhibit of victory. How are you keeping up with the research when things like that happen? When he goes and he takes crash this one, he makes it into a museum. Therefore, are the remaining still where the ship was? Do we know any research on that, I think?
We're pretty aware of the Pueblo situation. That was a January 1968 seizure of a Intel, Libya ship converted to an Intel ship off of Wonsan. Everyone came back from that mission. I think 9 months later, there was one body that was returned. I think the crew was 82 individuals, and 82 came back alive. One body returned. Since then, the North Koreans have used the Pueblo as, for museum attraction and so on. In that museum, there are a small number of aircraft, and from 97 to 99, we at then still jointly went in and inspected all the aircraft, recorded all of the tail numbers and so on the aircraft, and then asked the North Korean curators, where did you find this? What else do you know about it? What happened to the pilot and so on? And the curator would say, I don't know, we just got it. It's just here, because they find out about it. Unlike in Vietnam, the Vietnamese would keep locator cards with artifacts they had in their museums, where they got it and so on, history behind it. The Koreans didn't do that or were unwilling to share it with us. And periodically, folks have returned to the museum and to check on to see if there's anything new. But there has not been. As a matter of fact, in the museum, and as we saw it, I guess it's been rebuilt now, but as we saw it in the late 90s, it's practically impossible to get new equipment into the basement of that museum. So if they put the aircraft in and built the building over. Just saying.
Thank you. My name's Pam Jordan, and I really appreciate everything. It says it's on. Hello? Now it's working? Really appreciate all the work that you do for us families. Yesterday, listening, and I may just be misinterpreting, but it sounded like the focus is really on finding remains and identifying remains. And while that's extremely important, there's another piece of the puzzle that I'm more interested in, because I don't really have any expectations that my uncle's remains will be found, but I would just like to know what happened. And I've been able to find, through the help of John, documents in your files stating that 2 POWs saw someone with my uncle's last name in a POW camp. And so it seems like there's a lot of data out there, and you mentioned a lot of the sources this morning that y'all are using to research, analyze, cross-reference, but there's a lot of data out there that might give us families just an indication of where our loved one was last seen that's not really in our report. And so this morning in your talk, you mentioned a lot of ways that you were cross-referencing, but it also kind of sounded like it was just to find areas to go find remains. So my question to you is, do you have resources to do that research and cross-referencing? And if so, how large of a staff is it? And could you use help with that? Or, what else can be done to try to give us families some information about where our loved ones were last seen?
I can take this because I think your point is outstanding. And I know some of my folks in the room today, as you may know, my job within DCMO is external affairs. And I argue a lot, and God bless Congress, but the focus really, I think, Congress was focused on remains, recoveries, and IDs. And that's great. But I'll be the first to tell you, and I say this a lot, and my folks know this, the reality is, in our lifetimes, we're not going to recover your loved ones. There's just too many, even at 200 a year. But what we can do is answer your question and get you information, and that's what we do. And I've got a staff of 15 folks. When you have questions for research casualty officers, you send them to them. They come into my office, parcel them out. We get them to the analysts. Johnny Witt does the same thing at JPAC, and we work together on that. We're probably doing about 200 questions a month. That doesn't count all the emails. I know there's folks in this room that received emails from me at midnight, 11 o'clock, and that's Eastern Standard Time. And I know John has. We are going out of our way to try to get you answers because we realize that's a lot of times all we're going to get to. But not knowing this is difficult is not bringing your loved one home in some cases. And we emphasize that. There's a family in the back here, and the folks sitting back here probably hear Spanish translations back here. I cannot emphasize enough the folks that I have working for me, most of them all come back from combat tours, you know, F-18 pilot or A-60 pilot or Apache pilot. These guys, they go out of their way. The person that was here last year is Major Jorge Rosario, and Jorge Rosario is from Puerto Rico. And we knew there were folks in Puerto Rico that we had not reached, but we could not get. Going to Puerto Rico is like going to Hawaii or Las Vegas. It's tough to justify going to Puerto Rico for obvious reasons, especially if you can't tell who you're going to go meet. And we were working with Greg Gard at the Army trying to find out how many bands are in Puerto Rico that we could go out and reach. And if anybody knows anything about the Korean War, you know about the 65th Infantry Regiment. It was a Puerto Rican regiment. They were absolutely fearless, but they were absolutely, because they were a Puerto Rican regiment, they were not treated well. They were assigned to attack a hill that they were just getting decimated on that hill. And then when they decided they weren't going to attack that hill anymore, and a lot of them were court-martialed, they were treated extremely poorly, and there were a lot of men lost. And we wanted to get there, but the point of my story is Major Rosario went on his own dime, flew down there. He arranged with the governor of Puerto Rico. They got a facility for us. He worked with the local veterans. We found, I think it was 86 family members, and we brought them into a room. This was last December. We sent a team down there, we met with them. And some of them are here today, over this corner here. But the appreciation on their faces, they said nobody cared, nobody was giving us any answers. And that's really, I think, we're not gonna bring all your loved ones home, but we can get out there, we can try to answer your questions. We can tell you, every day your loved one's lost is being spoken about or someone's talking about them. I've said this before, my father served in World War II, came home, started a family, passed away 10 years ago. No one is ever gonna talk about my father's service again. But your loved ones, every day we're remembering your loved ones, every day we're working, we're trying to get answers to you. It may not be enough, and I know it's not enough, but we're trying, and I think that means something, and I think that's what we try to do. We're out there trying to get curbs running. You're going to hear more later on about what we're doing in the National Archives very specifically, but it is getting the information to you and answering your questions, I think is key, and I don't want to talk too much longer about it. So
I just want to say something. I go to the archives, last year 85 times, through 6,773 pages, if we're keeping track, sent to JPAC. But you can only do so much. There's a vast amount of stuff out there. Families are often the best source of detailed information based on historical records they may have or other records. If you have information about a document that says, hey, these two guys said they thought they saw this guy, go to your service casualty office.
I did.
Okay, and have them send it to us so we can look at it. What I'm telling you is we're out there and we're mowing the lawn, but it's a big lawn, and we're not getting every blade of grass. So things like that are helpful.
Back here. But we agree with you.
Yes, I have a question about yesterday. I don't know if this is slip of the tongue or what, but the gentleman that was talking said that there was no information in St. Louis on World War II that there was on Korean War. Is that a slip of the tongue or what?
Okay, gotta wait to warm up. You'll hear more about St. Louis in a while, but those are individual records. So there are World War II veterans whose records are there. I've seen my dad's record. Big thing I saw it, but as far as the units, the unit logs, the unit daily reports, morning reports are there, but the operational reports are in the archives. Actually, it's World War I on. Right, Tim? They are actually in College Park, Maryland.
About Korean War.
Korean War is in College Park, Maryland. Korean War individuals who are unaccounted for, their personal records are, or were in St. Louis. You really need to talk to our guy later on about that because some of those were destroyed in the fire. But the deceased personnel files of the unaccounted for from the Korean War, as I said, are at JFAC. Did I answer your?
Certainly. First off, I'd like to thank you. Unless someone has been in at the time of the people that have been there don't realize what you people are going through. I was there. I see it. And I know what you're having to do to find the witnesses. And when I hear some of the questions that have been asked, I think it's terrible. Because number one, it was hell. You guys are going through it, or you're looking for the guys. I lost a brother there, and many friends. Yes, they're still busy. I don't blame you for that. I blame what's on the other side. Why ask the questions when you know that you're doing all you can do?
Yes, I, like most everyone else here, are tremendously grateful for all of your efforts in trying to work with lower manpower and less money, and of course, the difficulties from the other side. So we do thank you for all of your work and your efforts. My concern is that I think many times we have to work for the most bang for the buck. If there's a site where there may be 30 or 40 personnel buried, of course, we're going to hit that one site first to try to identify them. But in some cases where there may only be one person that is missing, it's not quite as cost effective to look for that one person as opposed to 30. So this is kind of like a twofold question. The first part of it is if there is like the one person, Noel White, who was missing as an individual as opposed to group, are the chances just tremendously less likely to find his remains? The second part of the question is, like earlier, I think that we were told that all the men who were sent to Antung were sent home. But how about Louis Bergman, who were under depression, was sent there but did not return home? Yes, sir.
Sir?
Yes.
Bergman, we know very well. Yes, he was in Antung. Yes, he came back. He was brought back into the mainstream. He later ended up at Pox Palace, and he's a known death at Pox Palace several months later. We had a couple of men with similar names, but Bergman, we're talking about the attorney from Miami. Same man, he died at Pox Palace, definitely.
And the other was Noel White.
Doesn't ring a bell right off.
Right, you're asking if you can find an individual.
Yes.
Yeah, these would be the hardest cases, the individual isolated. Though the methods that General Keats folks use, they'll canvass a large area and hit the villages with the help of the Republic of Korea's agency for recovery also, to try and find out if anybody currently now knows about remains that have surfaced and so on. And they hit, for example, we mentioned before, the Busan perimeter, they've been there every year since 2000 looking. Now, over on top of that, they're also reviewing individually it is harder to find someone who's isolated than going to a major battle site.
So most likely the funds would be used to find the larger groups and then the individual groups?
They're for both. Yeah, and it's all part of the investigative process.
I want everybody to get the impression that it's back to the buck, where we're going to go after a 10-person aircraft over a single aircraft. It can be easier to find that larger aircraft, just because you have more individuals to deal with, you have more remains, you have more possibility that someone may come forward, but don't leave with the impression that there's a cost-benefit analysis on your loved ones that's been lost in a single-seat aircraft or lost on patrol by, say, a 6-person aircraft that we're going to prioritize.
And sir, let me also add, this afternoon, we're going to talk, Jake and I are going to talk specifically about prioritization and the process they use for that. So we're going to give much more detail on that this afternoon.
Thank you.
To go back to case summary reports, there was a lady here that mentioned wanting to know just what happened. There's not much. My question is, who's responsible for writing the case summary reports? I've been getting a case summary report for 6 years for my husband, who was missing in action in 1953. And it's basically the same report. So I had to dig and write to many people here to get some of the morning reports. If they have the morning reports and they have some witnesses, as in my case they did, you can tell, they tell you who saw your husband last and perhaps what condition that person was in, my husband was in. So I'm just wondering why some of the information that's in these morning reports isn't given to us. I mean, I could have known the first year.
Our guys write those. The problem is the morning reports are in St. Louis, and so we would have to go report by report. They're on microfiche wheels, so there's a regiment of 9 or 10 companies on these microfiche wheels, and you're looking every day in every unit, 365 days, 3 years. And so we'll go first for a morning report in St. Louis if we have a discrepancy on the lost date. That's number one. And it's more common in a morning report where there's no data than data. In your case, it's an exception to those.
And Lee Manning's going to talk more about that. He goes to the national, he goes to NRC, he's pulling morning reports routinely, because maybe 4 times a year. He's going to talk more about that. So if you're interested in morning reports, and the Air Force is going to kill me on this, put this out. But for the Army, you can get those morning reports. We can get them from the Air Force. Sometimes there's not a lot of information in there. It's just a listing of who was there that day, who's not, their status. So it's information. It's not inexpensive to go there and pull those reports, but we can do that.
Just one thing, I need to look at your case. That type of information is normally not in a morning report. It's more likely in the individual deceased personnel file where they've queried survivors and have provided a summary document that's a memo or something that says, this guy says this guy says this. And quite frankly, folks, we're nice people. I don't really want to tell you that I talked to the squad leader and he said, your brother's head was blown off. We just say, we talked to a witness who said that he was killed in action.
My brother died in Camp 5 in 1951, the spring of 51. And in 96, when I was named next of kin, I received his declassified file. And 5 men were debriefed and signed papers saying that they either witnessed his death or buried him or had his clothing or had the family pictures. And we as a family made the decision not to contact those people. We just thought that would bring it back to them so many years later. 2 people suggested to me yesterday that it might bring closure to those men too if they were still alive, to express how grateful we are to them, to have been with him at that time. And I wondered if anyone else had that experience or had contact with someone, and whether we should still do it.
Ma'am, I'm speaking unofficially for friends. The Korean War ex-POW Association meets annually, but more importantly, by definition, you are already a member of it. There are no dues, there are no fees, there are no involvements, except correspondence if you wish. They have standing policy, they meet, they interact, and if you're a survivor of a prisoner of war, or even a survivor of someone who might have been a prisoner of war, or even if you know that your loved one was not a prisoner of war, their webmaster would very much like to get an email from you. They'll farm it out to people who are either captured or lost in the same incident, or were in the same camp. They have a newsletter that they publish quarterly. Please, the webmaster's name is Cindy Chapman, but just webmaster, Korean War ex-POW Association, at your leisure.
I belong to it. I'm saying that personally, we made the decision not to do it. And I just wondered if we still should. There's still 2 surviving siblings.
Yes, question on the 3 F-86 crash sites that you're going to be talking to the Chinese about. Do we know the location of those sites and the date of their crash?
Yes, we do. We know who they are. We know the locations of the sites. Now, on one, we know the location where the individual is buried. He's buried in the cemetery. What we have to do is get the Chinese to help us find exactly the cemetery, because his plane disintegrated in the air. The two other cases, we know where the crash site is and where the individual bailed out. One individual did not make it out of his plane. The other did. And the Chinese archivists have gone in and interviewed witnesses to find exactly where he's buried on the ground. So those are 3 good, promising locations. 2 were 1952, 1 was 1953.
One clarification. Jennifer, Mike?
I just want to clarify something. I'm the Policy Negotiations Director at JPAC. The 3 F-86 sites that were referred to just a few minutes ago are not going to be investigated during our upcoming mission in August and September. We're doing an archival research trip. We have proposed those sites or presented those cases to the Chinese, and we are prepared to investigate them when we can work out some compensation issues with the Dandong officials. But I just wanted to ensure that everyone understood that we're not getting ready to go and investigate them in August and September.
Thank you for that clarification.
Stan, I know that you people are paying the Chinese to get into their archives. Are you satisfied with what we're getting? Are you going to put it up on a website? Exactly, what are you getting from the Chinese, and are they answering your questions?
We put the reports up. Put the reports up on the website. We get them translated, and we put them on our website for what was found. And they've been really good at. We put the reports on our website. We translate them because Chinese report in Mandarin might not help you. But we translate them into English. We put them up on our website, and we have a big laundry list for them to do research. And there, for us, was finding crash sites in China where we can help you guys account for men. And so that's what they started working on first. They found a site over in Guangdong, a crash at 12. Fortunately, in 2 missions, the JPAC teams were unable to find specific burial sites for the 12. But before that, all we knew was this plane was lost in bad weather. We didn't know that it crashed on land. We would not have known that had we not found out from the Chinese. So they're clarifying lost incidents that we didn't know anything about specifically. over a period of time, and they're getting better and better at and expanding out. And the agreement is not just Korean War, they're also reporting on Vietnam War and World War II, where we have we have a laundry list of the POW camps, and we want all the POW camp data. That's where they're lacking at the moment, but we just need we need to end up in the Gulag system. You have Americans who were kidnapped right after World War II off the streets of Berlin. They were released 2 years later. We know who a lot of these guys are because they came back. Here's our problem. We haven't got any good names. We haven't got solid names for the Korean War. We have sometimes the first name, sometimes the last name. When we have a full name, at the times when we have a full name given to us by a Russian source, we'll look that name up and we'll find that 9 American POW returnees said that individual died in a prisoner of war camp in North Korea. So are we going to believe a Russian who we can't poly, we don't know his background, we don't know his bona fides, or we're going to believe 9 of our heroes that came back from the war and told us about this individual? There is our problem. There's reporting of individuals who, from the Korean War, a time frame from the World War II time frame, in the prisoner of war camp or in the Gulag system. But we've never found a record. Jim Connell's been all over Russian archives, looking through card files, looking for names that could have been transliterated or names that could have been our guys. JPAC has actually dug a cemetery plot where Russians told us there were Americans there. Our problem is we've never found a body and we've never found an archival evidence that our guys from the Korean War were in there. What we have is CIA reporting from the 1950s. And here's the problem we have with CIA reporting from the 1950s. It's not 007 CIA case officer who's actually observing this. It's someone who he's paid to give him information. And he doesn't know whether that information is true or not. Also, on top of that, this is again with the blurred lines, there were people who came out from World War II. There were German soldiers and Austrian soldiers who came out of the gulags or the GUP system in 1945 up to 1950. We interviewed them under the Operation Ringer program. The Germans often had a similar debriefing program. These German soldiers worked in Cleveland and places like that for 20 years, went back to Germany and got conscripted into the German army, but they said their home of record was Cleveland. So are they American or are they German? They may be known in their prison cabinets as American, even though they fought in the German army. When the Austrians, they did research on 140,000 air missiles in World War II. They handed us a file of 28 individuals who were Austrian soldiers under conscription of the Wehrmacht who had a home of record of the United States because they worked in the United States. It just happened. When you went back to Germany, you got conscripted for the war. So here's the problem of trying to figure out what Americans are really they're dealing with from the Korean War. We haven't figured that out yet. And one more thing. You hear the stories about POW hauls, folks who were sent by train loads through China into the Soviet Union. And the train gauge is different from China into the Soviet Union at Manchuria. So they have to get out of the one train, get off the Chinese train, and get on the Russian train. So we're trying to figure out who these guys could be because there's really, really large numbers of them. Well, in the POW camp survey, we traced back all of the known POWs and we found the death date for the vast majority of them and the death location of North Korea. So who are these populations could possibly be? Then we looked at the individual battlefields. Where could these guys get big prisoner hauls from our status MIA populations? Well, they're going to have to get them from big battles. And what we're finding out from our military action reports from Unsan, from Kunri that was discussed from the Chosin Reservoir is there were individuals died in the hundreds, but the Morgan report clerk did not get that specific data. So here again, where is our population of hundreds of people who have gone to the Soviet Union? And it may have been an individual pilot here or there, but we don't have a good name yet. We don't have a solid name yet. There's you could say a very, one of these names is the F-55 1951 case, very, to say, the JCSD guys, you can say titillating. Here's the name that's got to be pursued further because of the first name is mentioned in a POW camp, and we know that, or Russian Gulag, and we know pretty much that the Russians had access to this individual and should have gone into Chinese hands and didn't. So we don't have a smoking gun yet, but we do have leads that need to be followed further. Now, just one more thing I'll say about the train, the prisoner halls on the trains. In trying to figure out who these people could have been, we went to the East German archives in Berlin, and we found that the French Foreign Legion, which is 40% German speaking, French Foreign Legion soldiers who defected to the Viet Minh were gathered in vast clumps and groups of folks. In the East German society, there would be a great propaganda coup. We repatriated all these people, German speakers, who were in the French Foreign Legion fighting the Viet Minh, and we repatriated them as heroes. So, beginning in the Korean War, these people were released by the Viet Minh, transited through China on the same transit as the reporting of these Americans, and these are Caucasians, and sent across to Manchuria and ultimately repatriated from the Trans-Siberian Railway into East Germany. And we have a list of 869 names on one group. These are all Caucasians, and this happened during the Korean War. So we don't know if this is inspiration of what the reporting is, but we do know we don't have the prisoner populations. So the hundreds and hundreds of folks could have been sent to prisoner of war camps or to the Gulag or the Gubi system in the Soviet Union.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Linda Maxwell, and I'm here representing my relative that was reported as being missing. However, we had our one-on-one report yesterday, and in looking over the report, I noticed that from the beginning, we were told that our relative was missing. There was no report of him. His name was not listed on any report as being missing. However, he's also not listed as being a prisoner of war. In reading the report further, I noticed that the report goes on to say that in 1990 to 1994, some of the lost sites were exhumed, their remains were returned, and then additional sets were returned in April 2007. But then our report mentions another soldier possibly whose remains were also missing, and that site was not exhumed. So we're a little confused because it sounds as if possibly there's someone else's information on this report.
Linda, we will sit down with you. We can have another one-on-one meeting to address that specifically, if that's okay with you.
That would be fine. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. We are, it's time for a break. That was about an hour.